Hi there, I'm Nancy from Black Sheep Knitting in Needham, Massachusetts. I'm sitting here in our local yarn shop. We hope to cater to everybody, to knitters and crocheters and even weavers. So we have an online shop. We have almost everything in the shop online. And so if you live far away from a yarn store, shop us online. We ship pretty quickly. We hope to anyway. I wanted to do a little recap of Rhinebeck. As most of you know, Rhinebeck is the New York Sheep and Wool Festival that happens every year at the Dutchess County Fairgrounds in Rhinebeck, New York. It has exploded in recent years into a 3-day event starting on Friday. Actually, there was something Thursday night. If you had a lot of money, I guess you could have gone to that. I think it involved maybe dinner and pre-shopping at Wool & Folk. I'm not sure. Wool & Folk began a few years ago, and it has been in, I want to say, 2 or 3 different venues. This year it took place in Catskill, I think, and in some mill buildings. And there's been a little blowback on that. They were not really very handicap accessible, and they were small rooms, and because it's become so popular, it was terribly crowded. Not to mention that it was pouring rain outside. We stood out in the rain to get in, and we luckily got there early and got a good place to park. So we only had to walk a couple blocks, and we kind of stood under a ledge or something that protected us a little bit from the rain. Anyway, we chatted with some people, and there was a woman, Megan, who was from, now I know the place in Michigan and now I'm forgetting, from Michigan, who said she watches the podcast. And then there were 4 women behind me from, I think, Northern California, who also watched the podcast. So that was kind of nice. So it was nice to see friendly faces and have people talk to us. The Wool & Folk had some wonderful, wonderful vendors, beautiful, beautiful yarns. And there were some people who were in tents outside, and I gather some of their merchandise got ruined or flooded, because again, as I said, it rained quite a bit. There were some wonderful food vendors outside. I had a lobster roll that was to die for. That was a wonderful thing. But as I said, it was a little too crowded for shopping. I couldn't get close enough to much of anything to really shop. There were a few places, I should say, but the crowds were tough to take. So we left there and went on to India Untangled. Now, India Untangled used to be the it thing to do on Friday, but I gather some people have chosen to do Wool & Folk vendors, Wool & Folk instead of India Untangled. Well, I have to tell you, India Untangled was wonderful. They had 2 big open, there were buildings that are open on the 2 sides, or 3 sides. And it was open spaces. There weren't tons, there were lots of people there, but it wasn't so crowded. So I actually was very, very happily bought yarn there. And it was lovely. And it was in a big, huge, this big horse showing venue, which I'd been there with my daughter years ago, showing her horse. It was a beautiful, beautiful place. And by then, I think it had stopped raining. But we weren't done yet, so we thought, well, we couldn't get into our Airbnb for a little bit, so there's another event that was taking place called Cake Palooza. And I think that was in Socrates. So we went over there, and it was in kind of a funny spot, and people were set up with those, tent kind of things. And that too was wonderful. And I did buy a sweater's worth of yarn in one of those, I think from Chelsea Yarns, I can't remember. Anyway, and it was very leisurely. It was later in the day, so it wasn't terribly crowded. Anyway, We went back to Saugerties, found a wonderful place to eat. It had warmed up a little, the rain had stopped, and we found a place that had a porch to eat outside. So we had a wonderful meal, and could I tell you the name of the restaurant? I could not. But the food was great. And then we found our digs and spent the night. It was lovely. And then went on to Rhinebeck. And in the past, we've always gotten there at 9 o'clock. We were almost the first people, or way before 9, and we tried to be the first people in line. This time, I guess I'm older, and we just decided, nah, let's just saunter over there around 10, which we did. And it didn't make any difference. We didn't have to wait in any line, though our parking was a little further away. No, it wasn't. We thought it was going to be, but it wasn't far away. And of course, we had a wonderful time there. There's so much to see. And it isn't even just the vendors and all the yarn. It's seeing all the people in all the fabulous sweaters and different things that they're wearing, and hats and scarves and shawls. And that in itself is just, it's so much fun. But again, it was a little crowded, not terribly. And we found, and you could see some of the, like Andrea Mowry, and some of the super. I saw Gudrun Johnston and Mary Jane Mucklestone. They were sitting with their book. They have a new book out called Shetland something. It's a great place to get knitting books. There's a store called Merritt Books. Don't know where they are, somewhere in New York State, and they always have tons of books and lots of kids' books too. So we had a lot of fun around there. I had to go see the sheep because they do have sheep and goats at this fair. I didn't see any alpaca, but I didn't look that. Usually there's some alpaca or llamas, but I didn't see them. I guess we didn't look. Anyway, the food vendors there, of course, were wonderful. There was an incredibly long line all day to get the cider donuts. So whoever was doing those cider donuts did pretty well. And they have a building that's all foods. They have wine and different spirits, and they have chocolates and cheese and beef jerky and all kinds of goodies that you can buy. And there's, you can taste their dips, and there's just fun things, and like beautiful wood cheese boards and cutting boards and soaps and that kind of thing. So there's a little something for everybody there. And of course they do some workshops, but I wasn't paying attention to what they were, so I don't really know. Those, I'm sure, were sold out in the very beginning. So that said, it's worth a trip. It's about a little over 3 hours from Boston if there's no traffic. Many people do it from here in a day, and I always I just count it as a little vacation. It's nice to go and stay overnight and not have any place to be at any particular time. So it's a lot of fun. Next venue is probably going to be Vogue Knitting. And my goal is to knit at least one of the sweaters I got to make by Vogue Knitting. So we'll see how that goes. I hope I can do it. Now I have something very serious I want to talk to you about. It's your yarn stash. This is a very serious issue. And I'm here to tell you, stop feeling guilty about your yarn stash. They're art supplies, and one must have lots of choice of yarn. And I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it, that you should lose the guilt. Do not feel guilty. Do not stop buying yarn. Some yarn is sometimes not meant to be knit with. It's just meant to have. And it's okay. And if you think of your spouse or partner or whoever you live with, I'm sure they've got hobbies. Oh, like how about men who play golf? And that's just paying gobs of money for a day of nothing. They don't get anything in the end except some exercise. So anyway, I hope that you can feel good about the yarn that you have and love the yarn that you have. And if you don't love it, give it away. You can. There are lots of places that take donations, and if it's yarn you bought 10 or 15 years ago, it's probably out of style and not something you want to knit with anyway. So get rid of it. Let somebody else enjoy it and love it. So I had to say that after having gone to Rhinebeck and buying yarn I don't need.
So I shouldn't feel guilty about that $75
Right.
gain of silk.
Right. I actually,
The Lurex.
there was a company there, a woman who was promoting yarn that was, I guess, spun and dyed in Rwanda. And my son has spent some time there, and it's a great place, and Partners in Health it was big in promoting healthcare in Rwanda. So I thought, well, I'll buy a skein to support her. So I looked carefully and wasn't sure. Then I found one that had Angora, and she said, oh yes, we imported Angora rabbits there, so now they can, spin with Angora. Oh, I said, oh great, I'll get that. I got a beautiful color, blah blah. And then I give her my credit card, and then it comes back, and it was $78. And I said, oh my God, what have I done? But I thought, it's for a good cause. It's for a good cause. Anyway, so enjoy your yarn stash. It's nice to have choice. So I like to choose projects. I love to discover yarn that I forgot I had. Find a nice way to store it. Get yourself, IKEA has some wonderful felt containers, and they're not very expensive, but they're kind of cool and kind of modern looking. I got a bunch of those, and I just put yarn in that, or you can just get, the old plastic bin that keeps the moths out. But don't feel bad. You don't feel bad. I was a potter for a very long time, and at any given time I'd have a couple thousand pounds of clay. You have to have that, and several glazes that just sat in buckets, but you had to have that in case you wanted to make blue mugs this time, or green bowls. You had to have all that stuff. So anyway, that's my speech on yarn stash. I wanted to answer a couple questions, and here's one. This may take a little while, so this may be the only one I get to. But a woman writes, I would love it if you could spend some time talking about fiber characteristics. What stretches, what is good for color work. For people who find non-superwash and mohair to be scratchy, what are good combos of fibers, etc.? It might not be something to cover in one episode, but there are only a couple of small yarn shops within an hour's drive, but I worry about ordering online since I can't feel the yarn. Well, this could be a three-part answer, but a three-episode answer, but I'm going to try to do this as best I can. Yarns differ a great deal depending on the fiber, depending on the spin, the way it's spun. The fibers differ in wool. They differ a great deal according to the sheep that they come from. And some sheep, the one sheep breed that we know is really soft is the merino sheep, and they produce beautiful soft yarns. Merino is sometimes mixed with different things. If it's a sock yarn, they're mixed with nylon, and when nylon is put in something, it gives it extra strength. So I recommend merino. I've seen some yarns lately that I really like Polworth, and I think I just bought some Polworth this weekend. So the breeds are different. For instance, if you get a woolly wool, which we call, that people sort of identify as the scratchier wool, well, they're not as highly processed as some other wools. They're made from sheep that maybe don't have the softest yarn, but they're great for certain things, and they don't stretch terribly. They wear like iron. It's just amazing. Things like, we have a yarn called Lannis Light that is kind of a woolly wool, or Patagonia from Juniper Moon Fibers. Those are what we call a little bit woollier wools, but I have to say, I was wearing on Saturday the I just had a t-shirt on, and I was wearing the Alanis Light was the bottom part of the sweater that I had on, and it wasn't scratchy or anything. It was lovely. And some people love only that kind of yarn. So I recommend that kind of yarn for sweaters. It's wonderful. This is the Patagonia. And some of these you find soften a great deal with wear and with washing. Depending on the staple length, so that's the length of the hairs, and some sheep have longer than others, some are very short. For instance, cashmere. Cashmere, which is a lovely, you can't lose with cashmere or merino or something that has some alpaca in it, and or silk, something like that. And I'll talk more about alpaca in a minute. But like cashmere has short, fine hairs, and they come from the belly of the Angora goat. That has nothing to do with the Angora rabbit, but they're cashmere goats. And what happens though with that yarn, and it's even true if you buy the most expensive cashmere sweater you can find, it's going to pill. And yarn pills anyway. I mean, I don't not buy something because of the pilling, because I have a gleaner which scrapes all the pills off. But those short fibers, so yarns that have really short fibers, come loose, and that's what makes the pills happen. But I started to talk about alpaca, and alpaca, like cashmere, is wonderfully, wonderfully soft, but it has absolutely no memory. It just will keep, well, to a point. It stretches. It doesn't necessarily bounce back. So I don't necessarily recommend something like an alpaca for 100% alpaca for a sweater, for instance. I think it's just going to not hold its shape. It's going to be stretchy. But if you had an alpaca and a merino, or an alpaca and something else, would probably be perfectly fine. And things like alpaca and silk and things that are very flowy and lovely may not be good for a sweater, but they're wonderful for shawls and scarves and cashmere, cowls. A silk shawl is the best. And with shawls, especially if they're lace, who cares if you want them to stretch a little bit. Some of the woollier wools, such as like this Patagonia, are great for things like mittens. If you want a really warm mitten, you want something that's going to hold warmth, and you're going to want to knit it fairly tight because you don't want air to get through the mitten and make your hands cold. Same time sometimes with a hat. Some of the scratchier yarns are things like Lopi. And people have been using Lopi for years. And it's wonderful for keeping you warm. It's wonderful for keeping you dry. But it's a little scratchy. But that again, there again, it'll last for years, and it's great as an outer garment. And the more you wash it and the more you wear it, the more it softens up. Mohair, as someone said, mohair is scratchy. Well, the mohair we used to buy is scratchy, but now they're putting mohair with silk, and it is wonderful. So suppose you bought this yarn and you thought, this Patagonia, and you thought, well, it's just not soft enough. Drag it with the mohair that has silk in it, and you're going to love wearing it. It softens it up. It's amazing. So the mohair that's out now, this is the Isayers silk mohair, and this is Lanagato silk mohair, and you can see the shiny bits of silk in it. So it softens it up a great deal. Another yarn that's out that has become very popular is the Surrey Silk Cloud, or Surrey Cloud Lace, depending on which company is doing it. But it's baby Surrey alpaca and silk, and this is to die for. A sweater in this would be fantastic. Single, I don't know, if I were doing it, I might hold it double, but I could go on and on about different types of yarns. Rely on your local yarn shop to help you a little bit. I'm thinking about some other fibers that people use. There are an awful lot of people who say they're allergic to wool. And while they may well have, somebody, if you develop a rash or your throat closes up, you definitely have an allergy. But a lot of people are just have sensitive skin, which is fine. We all have different kinds of skin. But there are other things you can do. As I said, you can knit with a softer yarn. We have some yarns that are llama, like baby llama, soft as soft can be. The old-fashioned yarn is wools that your mother would buy you a wool sweater for winter, and they were scratchy. And for somebody with sensitive skin, it's not so much fun to wear. But we have lots of other fibers. We have some cottons, and we have cotton that isn't like the old-fashioned cotton, the mercerized cotton. Remember, if you all remember, Cotton Classic was one. And they're mercerized cottons, and they have no give to them. They're not pleasant to knit with. They're not so much fun. But there's some new cottons, some of them are Egyptian cotton, that are incredibly soft. This is an example of one that is from Blue Sky Fibers. I wonder where this is made. But this is a certified organic cotton made in Peru. So a lot of them come from Peru, so I guess they grow cotton there. But this is lovely to knit with and produces a beautiful finished project. And people say, oh, doesn't cotton stretch? This doesn't stretch very much. And again, if it stretches too much, you just wash it and push it back into shape. This is another one. I've knit with this a couple times. This is called Sammy. And this, again, is an organic Peruvian cotton that is the softest thing you can imagine. We also have cotton and linen blends. Now, linen is a fiber that does stretch. And if you use it by itself, it will stretch some. But it also washes beautifully. Excuse me. And sometimes you can just throw it in the dryer, and it will go right back to the way it was. We have another yarn, and we've shown this a lot. This is called Lena, which is a cotton and linen blend. And this one stretches a little bit. It's not terrible, but it's a great, great alternative for somebody who wants something. You can make a sweater out of this for the winter, and it's reasonably warm. It's not bad. And you can use one of these. This is a worsted weight cotton, so you can make a nice cotton sweater. So we also have other blends that they might be, what else? Camel and alpaca and different things mixed together. So some of those yarns are really, really nice. But anything that's got merino in it is going to be, you can count on it being soft. It's not going to scratch you. We have another popular yarn here in the shop called Sueño. And we have it in a sport weight and a worsted weight. And it's a merino and bamboo. And the bamboo, and somebody said, oh, bamboo isn't good for babies. I think by the time that bamboo gets processed, it has no relation to bamboo whatsoever. So they make it into something, it's almost like, they call it tencel. There are different things that it's called. So I'm looking around the shop to think if there are other things that I recommend or don't recommend. Well, I don't try to keep yarns that I don't recommend in the shop. But I sympathize with you if you don't live near a yarn shop. Sometimes you can buy a skein of yarn if you want to try it out and see if you're going to like it, if it's soft enough. And I don't know what, one thing I did want to say is one of the things about these woollier wools that are great, and they're great for color work, particularly if you're you don't want to do a lot of floats, you want longer floats. What happens if you can make the floats long enough, with wear, they felt into the fabric a little bit. They also are great if you're steeking, which is when you knit color work in the round. So it's how those Norwegian sweaters and other ones that you see with the beautiful color work in, but are cardigans. It's not so much fun to purl doing color work. So what they do is they knit everything in the round, and you leave a band here of extra stitches, and you cut. You cut all of those, and then it gets folded over and tacked down, and then you can add a button band. Those sticky yarns, these woolly wools, are very sticky, and so it's very easy cutting them. Those stitches aren't going to go anywhere. And it's also, I find knitting with yarns like this, the less slippery yarns, it's easy to rip things out. The stitches go nowhere. They're not going to move. Whereas if you're knitting with silk, or sometimes some cottons, but not most of the ones we have don't do this so much, but the stitches don't come out. They'll just stay there, and you can redo them. So I hope that helps to answer a little bit of your question about fibers and their characteristics. They're all different. There's a really good book called The Book of Yarn. So if you really want to learn more about it, and I don't remember the author, but you can find it. Tells you a lot about fibers.